Rebecca Martinez disappeared on October 15, 1997, while leading a weekend hiking expedition in the remote forests of Humboldt County, Northern California. The 32-year-old environmental consultant from Sacramento was serving as guide for a group of 5 travelers when all communication ceased during what was planned as a 3-day camping trip in the redwood wilderness near the town of Orick. 23 years later, in March 2020, forestry workers conducting routine survey operations discovered human remains and personal belongings sealed inside a massive sequoia tree, approximately 40 feet above ground level. The discovery would reopen one of Northern California's most puzzling missing persons cases and raise questions about what really happened to Rebecca Martinez and her companions during that autumn weekend in 1997. According to official records from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, Martinez had organized the hiking expedition through her consulting firm, which specialized in environmental impact assessments for construction projects. The group consisted of Martinez and 4 clients: Dr. James Crawford, a cardiologist from San Francisco; Linda Chen, a software engineer from San Jose; Mark Thompson, a civil attorney from Oakland; and Sarah Williams, a freelance journalist from Los Angeles. Martinez's business partner, David Kowalski, told investigators that the trip was designed as a team-building exercise for professionals who had worked together on various environmental projects. The group planned to hike established trails in Prairie Creek Redwoods State Park before setting up camp in a designated area near Gold Bluffs Beach. Martinez had led similar expeditions multiple times and was considered highly experienced in wilderness navigation. The last confirmed contact came on Friday evening, October 15th, when Martinez used her satellite phone to check in with the park ranger station at approximately 6:30 p.m. Ranger Supervisor Tom Patterson, who took the call, later stated that Martinez reported the group had reached their planned campsite and that weather conditions were favorable. She indicated they would continue north along the coastal trail the following morning and expected to exit the park by Sunday afternoon. When Martinez failed to make her scheduled check-in call on Saturday evening, park officials initially attributed the silence to equipment failure or poor satellite coverage in the dense forest canopy. However, by Sunday night, when the group had not returned to their vehicles at the trailhead parking area, Martinez's emergency contact protocol activated. The search operation began Monday morning, October 18th, involving teams from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, California Highway Patrol helicopter units, and volunteer search and rescue organizations from 3 counties. According to Sheriff's Captain Robert Hayes, who coordinated the initial response, searchers found the group's 2 rental vehicles exactly where they had been parked, with no signs of disturbance. Martinez's sister, Carmen Rodriguez, drove to Humboldt County from her home in Fresno when she learned about the missing group. Rodriguez told investigators that her sister had called her Thursday night before the trip, discussing plans for an upcoming family gathering, and mentioning she was looking forward to showing her clients some of her favorite locations in the redwood forest. The search operation expanded over the following weeks to cover more than 50 square miles of wilderness terrain. Teams discovered the group's intended campsite, where they found a properly extinguished fire ring and minimal camping debris, but no personal belongings or equipment that would definitively link to the missing travelers. Dr. Crawford's wife, Patricia, flew to California from San Francisco and established a temporary command center at a motel in Crescent City, coordinating with other families and maintaining contact with law enforcement. According to her statements to investigators, her husband had been eager to participate in the expedition, having recently completed a wilderness first aid course in preparation for the trip. Linda Chen's parents, who lived in Taiwan, arrived in California 3 weeks after the disappearance. Through an interpreter, they told deputies that their daughter had moved to Silicon Valley in 1995 and had developed a passion for outdoor activities after years of working in technology. Chen had sent them photographs from previous hiking trips and had described Martinez as knowledgeable and safety-conscious. Mark Thompson's law partner, Robert Kim, told investigators that Thompson had mentioned the hiking trip during their last conversation on Thursday, October 14th. According to Kim, Thompson viewed the expedition as an opportunity to network with other professionals while experiencing California's natural wilderness areas. Sarah Williams had been working as a freelance writer, specializing in environmental and travel topics. Her roommate in Los Angeles, Jennifer Walsh, stated that Williams had considered the trip both recreational and potentially professional, as she planned to write an article about ecotourism in Northern California. The initial investigation revealed that all 5 individuals had paid Martinez's consulting firm standard rates for guided wilderness experiences. Bank records showed the transactions had been completed several weeks before the trip, indicating advanced planning rather than spontaneous decision-making. Weather data from October 1997 showed that conditions in Humboldt County had been typical for the season, with daytime temperatures in the mid-60s Fahrenheit and no precipitation during the weekend in question. Park officials noted that trail conditions were good and that no unusual hazards had been reported in the area where the group planned to hike. As weeks passed without any trace of the missing travelers, theories began circulating within the local community. Some residents speculated about the possibility of encounters with wildlife, though park biologists noted that aggressive incidents involving multiple people were extremely rare in the region. Others suggested that the group might have become lost and wandered into more remote areas outside the search perimeter. The case attracted regional media attention, with newspapers throughout Northern California publishing photographs of the missing individuals and requesting public assistance. A reward fund, established by family members, eventually reached $15,000 for information leading to the whereabouts of any member of the group. By December 1997, active search operations had been suspended, though the case remained open. Detective Lisa Morgan of the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, who served as lead investigator, acknowledged in interviews that the complete absence of physical evidence made the case particularly challenging. The families of the missing travelers maintained hope and continued their own efforts to locate their loved ones. Carmen Rodriguez organized annual vigils in Orick, and Patricia Crawford hired private investigators to review the case file and conduct additional searches. In 2001, human remains discovered near the Klamath River were initially thought to possibly belong to one of the missing travelers, but DNA analysis ruled out any connection to the 1997 disappearances. Similar false leads occurred several times over the following 2 decades, each time raising and then dashing the hopes of family members who had never stopped searching for answers. The March 2020 discovery that would finally break the case occurred during a routine forest health assessment conducted by the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. Arborist technician Michael Santos was using specialized equipment to examine the interior of a giant sequoia when his camera detected what appeared to be foreign objects embedded within the tree's hollow core. According to Santos, the sequoia in question stood approximately 300 feet tall and was estimated to be over 800 years old. The tree showed signs of historical fire damage that had created a large hollow chamber in its trunk, accessible only through a narrow opening about 40 feet above ground level. Further investigation revealed human skeletal remains, along with hiking equipment, identification cards, and other personal items that had been preserved in the tree's dry interior environment. DNA analysis confirmed that the remains belonged to at least 3 of the 5 missing travelers from 1997. The discovery raised immediate questions about how the remains and belongings had come to be positioned so high inside the sequoia tree. Forest experts noted that the opening was not accessible through normal climbing methods and would have required specialized equipment or techniques to reach. Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic anthropologist consulted by the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office, stated that the condition of the remains was consistent with the 23-year timeline and that the tree's interior had provided protection from normal decomposition processes. The renewed investigation, led by Detective Ryan Clark, began examining whether the 1997 disappearance had been properly investigated and whether crucial evidence might have been overlooked. Clark acknowledged that the discovery inside the sequoia presented more questions than answers, and that determining how the travelers had ended up in such an unusual location would require extensive analysis. Family members who had waited more than 2 decades for answers expressed both relief at finally having some resolution and frustration at the many questions that remained unanswered. Carmen Rodriguez told reporters that while she was grateful to finally know her sister's fate, she needed to understand the circumstances that led to such a tragic outcome. The investigation continues as authorities work to piece together the events of October 1997 and determine what happened during those final days in the Northern California wilderness. The case has attracted renewed attention from both law enforcement agencies and the public, all seeking to understand how 5 experienced adults could disappear so completely, only to be found decades later in one of nature's most unlikely hiding places. The search for Rebecca Martinez and her 4 companions intensified on Monday morning, October 20, 1997, when Humboldt County Sheriff's deputies discovered that none of the missing travelers had returned to their scheduled pickup locations or contacted their families as planned. What began as a routine missing persons case would evolve into one of the most extensive search operations in Northern California history. Detective Lisa Morgan, assigned as lead investigator, arrived at the Prairie Creek Redwoods State Park Visitor Center at 7 a.m. to coordinate with park officials and establish a command post. According to her incident report, the 2 rental vehicles remained undisturbed in the parking area where the group had left them 3 days earlier. Both cars showed no signs of tampering, and personal items left inside suggested the travelers had expected to return as scheduled. Park Ranger Tom Patterson, who had taken Martinez's last radio contact on Friday evening, provided investigators with details about the conversation. According to Patterson's written statement, Martinez had sounded relaxed and confident during their brief exchange. She reported that the group had successfully reached their designated camping area near Gold Bluffs Beach and planned to continue north along established coastal trails the following day. The initial search team consisted of 12 deputies, 6 park rangers, and volunteers from the Humboldt County Search and Rescue Organization. Team leader Captain Robert Hayes divided the operation into grid patterns, focusing first on the last known location Martinez had reported during her Friday evening check-in. Carmen Rodriguez arrived from Fresno late Monday evening and immediately drove to the sheriff's office to provide investigators with additional background information about her sister. According to Detective Morgan's notes, Rodriguez described Martinez as extremely cautious and methodical in her outdoor activities, always carrying backup communication equipment and following established safety protocols. Rodriguez told investigators that her sister had been leading guided wilderness trips for nearly 5 years, without any serious incidents. Martinez maintained detailed records of every expedition, including participant information, planned routes, and emergency contingencies. However, these records were kept at her Sacramento office, which deputies would not be able to access until Tuesday morning. Dr. James Crawford's wife, Patricia, contacted the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office on Tuesday morning after failing to reach her husband by phone. According to her statement, Crawford had promised to call her Saturday evening, but had never made contact. Patricia Crawford told Detective Morgan that her husband carried a cellular phone for emergencies, though service in the remote forest areas was known to be unreliable. The search operation expanded significantly on Tuesday, October 21st, when California Highway Patrol helicopter units joined ground teams in surveying the coastal wilderness areas. Pilot Lieutenant Michael Torres reported that dense fog and low cloud cover limited visibility during morning flights, but conditions improved by afternoon, allowing crews to examine terrain that would have been inaccessible to ground searchers. Linda Chen's supervisor at a San Jose software company, David Park, contacted authorities after Chen failed to report for work Monday morning without explanation. Park told investigators that Chen was known for her reliability and had specifically mentioned taking vacation days for the hiking trip. He provided deputies with Chen's emergency contact information and confirmed that she had appeared excited about the wilderness expedition during their last conversation. Mark Thompson's law partner, Robert Kim, filed a missing person report with Oakland Police on Tuesday evening. Kim stated that Thompson had been scheduled to appear in court Wednesday morning for a civil hearing and would never have missed the appearance without advance notice. According to Kim, Thompson had mentioned the hiking trip briefly, but had not provided specific details about the planned route or duration. Sarah Williams's roommate in Los Angeles, Jennifer Walsh, contacted the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office Wednesday morning. Walsh told investigators that Williams had planned to return Sunday evening and begin work on a freelance writing assignment Monday morning. According to Walsh, Williams had packed camping equipment and a camera, intending to photograph the redwood forest for potential article publication. By Wednesday, October 22nd, The search operation involved more than 40 personnel from multiple agencies. Teams had covered approximately 15 square miles of wilderness terrain without discovering any trace of the missing group. Captain Hayes acknowledged in press statements that the complete absence of evidence was unusual for a case involving 5 individuals. The first significant discovery occurred Thursday afternoon, when search teams located what appeared to be the group's intended campsite near Gold Bluffs Beach. Investigators found a properly constructed fire ring containing cold ashes, along with minimal camping debris consistent with experienced outdoor enthusiasts who followed leave-no-trace principles. Detective Morgan's crime scene report noted that the campsite showed no signs of disturbance or conflict. The fire had been extinguished according to proper safety procedures, and the area appeared to have been cleaned before the group's departure. However, searchers found no personal belongings, equipment, or other evidence that would definitively link the site to Martinez and her companions. The discovery of the campsite raised new questions about the group's movements after Friday evening. If Martinez had contacted park officials from this location, investigators wondered why no trace of the travelers could be found along the established trail routes they had planned to follow. Weather records from the National Weather Service indicated that conditions throughout the weekend had remained favorable for hiking, with clear skies and mild temperatures. Park officials confirmed that no weather advisories or trail closures had been in effect during the period when the group disappeared. Local media attention intensified by the end of the first week, with television news crews from Eureka and San Francisco arriving to cover the search operation. The story gained regional prominence when family members organized a press conference at the Humboldt County Courthouse, appealing for public assistance and offering reward money for information about their loved ones. Carmen Rodriguez addressed reporters on Friday, October 24th, describing her sister as an experienced guide who would never take unnecessary risks with client safety. Rodriguez emphasized that Martinez carried multiple forms of emergency communication and always filed detailed trip plans with park authorities before beginning any expedition. Patricia Crawford flew to Humboldt County from San Francisco and established a temporary coordination center at a motel in Crescent City. Working with other family members, she organized volunteer search efforts and maintained daily contact with law enforcement agencies. Crawford told reporters that her husband had been looking forward to the trip and had purchased new hiking equipment specifically for the expedition. The search operation faced its first major challenge when Pacific storms moved into the region during the final weekend of October. Heavy rainfall and high winds forced the suspension of helicopter operations and made ground searches extremely difficult. Captain Hayes acknowledged that weather conditions were hampering efforts and potentially destroying evidence that might have provided clues about the group's fate. Linda Chen's parents arrived from Taiwan in early November and, through an interpreter, provided investigators with additional background about their daughter. They described Chen as cautious and well-prepared for outdoor activities, having completed wilderness safety courses after moving to California. Her parents emphasized that Chen maintained regular contact with family and would not have disappeared voluntarily. Detective Morgan expanded the investigation beyond the immediate search area, contacting businesses and residents throughout Humboldt County to determine whether anyone had seen the missing group. Gas stations, restaurants, and lodging facilities were provided with photographs of all 5 travelers, but no witnesses came forward with credible sightings. The case attracted attention from private investigators hired by family members, including former law enforcement officers with experience in wilderness searches. These independent efforts complemented official operations, but failed to produce additional leads or evidence about the group's whereabouts. By mid-November, search operations had covered more than 60 square miles of wilderness terrain. Teams had examined coastal areas, inland forest regions, and mountain trails that the group might have accessed from their last known location. Despite the extensive effort, investigators had found no personal belongings, equipment, or other physical evidence beyond the cleaned campsite near Gold Bluffs Beach. The discovery of human remains near the Eel River in late November briefly raised hopes among family members, but dental records quickly eliminated any connection to the missing travelers. Similar false leads would occur periodically over the following months, each time generating renewed interest before being ruled out through forensic analysis. Sheriff's Department spokesman Lieutenant David Price acknowledged in December interviews that the case presented unusual challenges. The complete absence of evidence made it difficult to determine whether the group had encountered natural hazards, become lost in remote terrain, or faced other circumstances that led to their disappearance. Detective Morgan continued working the case throughout the winter months, reviewing witness statements and examining all available evidence. Her reports indicate frustration with the lack of physical clues and the difficulty of establishing a timeline for events after the group's Friday evening radio contact with park officials. The families maintained pressure on law enforcement agencies to continue active investigation efforts. Carmen Rodriguez organized monthly meetings with Detective Morgan to review the case status and discuss potential new approaches to the search. These sessions, documented in police files, show the persistent hope that additional evidence would eventually surface. In January 1998, search efforts resumed with improved weather conditions, focusing on areas that had been inaccessible during earlier operations. Specialized teams with cadaver dogs examined remote ravines and canyon areas where the group might have encountered difficulties. However, these expanded searches produced no new evidence. The case received national attention when it was featured on television programs focusing on missing persons investigations. The exposure generated hundreds of tips from across the country, though none provided credible leads about the fate of Martinez and her companions. Detective Morgan and her team investigated every report, but found no connections to the Northern California disappearances. By spring 1998, active search operations had been officially suspended, though the case remained open in Sheriff's Department files. Captain Hayes announced that investigators would continue following up on new leads and tips, but acknowledged that the prospects for locating the missing travelers had diminished significantly. The lack of resolution took a severe emotional toll on family members who had devoted months to the search effort. Carmen Rodriguez returned to Fresno but continued organizing annual memorial services in Orick, maintaining contact with other families, and pushing for periodic review of the case file. Patricia Crawford hired private investigators to conduct independent analysis of the evidence and explore theories that might have been overlooked during the official investigation. These efforts continued for several years, but failed to produce breakthrough discoveries that would explain the group's fate or whereabouts. The 23 years that followed would see periodic revivals of interest in the case, usually triggered by discoveries of human remains in Northern California wilderness areas. Each time, families would experience renewed hope, followed by disappointment when forensic analysis ruled out connections to their missing loved ones. The March 2020 discovery inside the giant sequoia would finally provide answers that had eluded investigators for more than 2 decades, but it would also raise disturbing new questions about what really happened during those final days in October 1997. The discovery inside the giant sequoia in March 2020 triggered the most intensive forensic investigation in Humboldt County history, as Detective Ryan Clark and his team worked to understand how human remains and personal belongings had ended up 40 feet above ground in a tree that had stood for centuries. The evidence recovery operation would take 3 weeks to complete and reveal details that fundamentally changed the understanding of what happened in October 1997. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Amanda Foster arrived from the University of California, Davis on March 18, 2020, to oversee the extraction of remains from the sequoia's hollow interior. According to her preliminary report, the tree's unique internal environment had preserved not only skeletal remains, but also fabric, leather goods, and metal objects that would have decomposed under normal outdoor conditions. The recovery process required specialized equipment borrowed from CAL FIRE's Technical Rescue Unit. Arborist Michael Santos, who had made the initial discovery, worked with fire department personnel to establish safe access to the tree's interior chamber. Santos told investigators that the opening was barely large enough for one person to enter, and that the remains appeared to have been placed deliberately rather than falling naturally into the space. Dr. Foster's initial examination identified remains from at least 3 individuals, based on dental evidence and bone analysis. Among the recovered items were a California driver's license belonging to Rebecca Martinez, a hiking boot consistent with equipment Dr. James Crawford had purchased before the trip, and a camera that Linda Chen's parents later confirmed their daughter had carried during the expedition. The condition of the personal belongings raised immediate questions for investigators. Detective Clark noted in his report that leather items showed minimal deterioration, and metal objects displayed surface corrosion, consistent with the 23-year time frame. However, the positioning of items within the tree suggested they had been arranged rather than scattered by natural processes. Carmen Rodriguez, now 54 and living in Sacramento, received notification about the discovery from Detective Clark on March 20th. According to her statement, Rodriguez had never stopped believing that her sister's remains would eventually be found, but the location inside the sequoia tree was beyond anything she had imagined possible. Patricia Crawford, who had maintained contact with law enforcement throughout the intervening years, drove to Humboldt County immediately upon learning about the discovery. Crawford told investigators that while she felt relief at finally having answers, the circumstances of the find raised disturbing questions about what her husband and the others had experienced during their final days. The forensic analysis expanded when Dr. Foster discovered evidence suggesting that not all 5 travelers were represented among the remains found in the tree. DNA testing confirmed the presence of Martinez, Crawford, and Chen, but no definitive evidence was located for Mark Thompson or Sarah Williams. This discovery prompted Detective Clark to reopen the missing persons cases for the 2 individuals whose fates remained unknown. Michael Santos provided investigators with detailed information about the sequoia and its historical significance in the local forest ecosystem. According to Santos, the tree had survived multiple forest fires over the centuries, and the hollow chamber had likely been created by a significant burn event decades or possibly centuries before 1997. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Detective Clark discovered that the original 1997 search operation had not included the specific area where the sequoia stood. According to archived records, search teams had concentrated their efforts along established hiking trails and coastal areas, following the route that Martinez had indicated during her last radio contact with park officials. Former Detective Lisa Morgan, who had led the original investigation, met with Clark's team in April 2020 to review the case files and discuss the new evidence. Morgan acknowledged that the 1997 search parameters had been based on Martinez's reported location and planned route, which would not have included the more remote interior forest where the sequoia was located. The question of how the 3 individuals had reached the interior of the tree became central to the renewed investigation. Forest experts consulted by the Sheriff's Department confirmed that accessing the hollow chamber would have required climbing equipment or other specialized tools that were not among the personal belongings recovered from the tree. David Kowalski, Martinez's former business partner, was re-interviewed by investigators in May 2020. Kowalski, now retired and living in Oregon, told Detective Clark that he had reviewed his records from 1997 and could find no indication that Martinez had planned to deviate from the coastal trail route she had filed with park authorities. The investigation expanded to examine whether other individuals might have been involved in the events of October 1997. Detective Clark's team reviewed records of all personnel who had been in the area during the relevant time frame, including park employees, Forest Service workers, and local residents with knowledge of the remote forest areas. Tom Patterson, the park ranger who had taken Martinez's final radio contact, was interviewed extensively about his conversation with the group leader. Patterson, who had retired from the Park Service in 2015, told investigators that Martinez had sounded completely normal during their Friday evening communication and had given no indication of plans to change her intended route. The forensic examination revealed additional puzzling details about the condition of the recovered items. Dr. Foster noted that clothing fragments showed patterns of preservation that were inconsistent with normal decomposition processes, even accounting for the protective environment inside the tree. Some organic materials appeared to have been exposed to extreme temperatures before being placed in the sequoia. Linda Chen's parents, who had returned to Taiwan years earlier, were contacted through the State Department about the discovery of their daughter's remains. Through diplomatic channels, they expressed gratitude that Chen had finally been found, but requested additional information about the circumstances that led to her presence in such an unusual location. The investigation revealed that several local residents had reported unusual activity in the forest during October 1997, though these reports had not been connected to the missing travelers at the time. A retired logger named Frank Morrison told investigators that he had seen smoke from what appeared to be an uncontrolled fire in the interior forest area. During the weekend, the group disappeared. Morrison's account prompted Detective Clark to examine historical fire records from October 1997. According to CAL FIRE documents, no official fires had been reported in the relevant area during that time frame, though Morrison insisted he had observed smoke for several hours on Saturday afternoon. The renewed investigation attracted attention from family members of Mark Thompson and Sarah Williams, whose remains had not been found in the Sequoia. Thompson's former law partner, Robert Kim, contacted Detective Clark to inquire about efforts to locate the two missing individuals and determine whether they might be found elsewhere in the forest. Jennifer Walsh, Sarah Williams's former roommate, provided investigators with additional details about Williams's plans for the trip. According to Walsh, Williams had mentioned her intention to document the expedition for a possible magazine article and had carried professional camera equipment in addition to personal belongings. The search for Thompson and Williams expanded to areas surrounding the Sequoia, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs to examine locations where additional remains might be located. These efforts, conducted throughout the summer of 2020, covered several square miles of forest terrain, but produced no additional discoveries. Detective Clark's investigation revealed inconsistencies in the timeline that had been established during the original 1997 investigation. Analysis of cellular phone records, unavailable during the initial search, showed that Dr. Crawford's mobile phone had registered contact with a cell tower south of the park on Saturday morning, October 16th, despite Martinez's report that the group was camping near Gold Bluffs Beach. The cellular phone data suggested that at least one member of the group had traveled to an area not included in their planned itinerary, raising questions about whether the travelers had changed their route voluntarily or had been led to the interior forest by someone else. Further examination of the Sequoia revealed evidence that the hollow chamber had been accessed multiple times over the years. Forensic analysts found tool marks on the interior walls that appeared to have been made with metal implements, suggesting that someone had modified the natural opening to facilitate access to the chamber. The investigation expanded to include interviews with current and former residents of the area who might have knowledge about the Sequoia or unusual activities in the forest. Several individuals mentioned local stories about the tree being used historically as a shelter or storage location, though no one could provide specific information about events in 1997. Dr. Foster's final forensic report, completed in August 2020, confirmed that the three individuals had died approximately 23 years earlier, consistent with the 1997 timeframe. However, the cause of death could not be determined based on the skeletal remains, and toxicology analysis was not possible due to the age and condition of the specimens. The lack of definitive answers about how the travelers died or why they were found in the Sequoia continued to frustrate family members and investigators. Carmen Rodriguez told reporters that while she was grateful to finally know her sister's fate, the unusual circumstances of the discovery raised more questions than they answered. The case attracted renewed media attention throughout 2020, with several investigative journalists attempting to piece together the events of October 1997. Documentary filmmakers and podcast producers contacted Detective Clark's office, requesting access to case files and interview opportunities with key witnesses. By the end of 2020, the investigation had generated hundreds of tips and leads from the public, though none provided definitive explanations for the circumstances surrounding the discovery in the Sequoia. Detective Clark acknowledged that the case presented unique challenges and that determining the complete truth about what happened might require additional evidence or witness testimony. The questions surrounding Mark Thompson and Sarah Williams remained unresolved as the investigation moved into 2021. Family members continued to hope that additional searches might locate the missing individuals and provide closure to their decades-long ordeal. The breakthrough in the 23-year-old case came in February 2021, when Detective Ryan Clark received an unexpected phone call from a former Humboldt County resident living in Arizona. The caller, 68-year-old retired construction worker Eugene Hartley, told investigators he had information about the missing travelers that he had kept secret for more than 2 decades. Hartley contacted the sheriff's department after seeing news coverage about the discovery in the sequoia tree. According to his statement to Detective Clark, Hartley had been working as a contract logger in the area during October 1997 and had witnessed events that he now believed were connected to the disappearance of Rebecca Martinez and her companions. In his formal interview, conducted via video conference due to COVID-19 restrictions, Hartley described encountering a group of hikers in distress on Saturday morning, October 16, 1997. According to Hartley, he was operating equipment in a remote section of forest when he heard calls for help and discovered several individuals who appeared to be lost and separated from their planned route. Hartley told investigators that the group consisted of 3 people who matched descriptions of Martinez, Dr. Crawford, and Linda Chen. He stated that they appeared disoriented and reported that 2 members of their party had become separated during the night. According to Hartley, the travelers were concerned about their missing companions and requested assistance in contacting park authorities. The retired logger's account provided the first credible explanation for the cellular phone data, showing Dr. Crawford's phone had contacted a tower south of the park on Saturday morning. Hartley confirmed that his work site was in an area where mobile phone coverage was available, unlike the remote coastal regions where the group had originally planned to camp. Detective Clark asked Hartley why he had not reported this encounter to authorities during the original 1997 investigation. According to Hartley's statement, he had been working without proper permits in areas that were technically off-limits to commercial logging operations. Hartley explained that he feared legal consequences if his unauthorized activities became known to law enforcement. Hartley's revelation prompted Detective Clark to examine commercial logging records from October 1997. Investigation revealed that several companies had been conducting operations in Humboldt County forests during that period, though Hartley's specific worksite was not included in any official permits or environmental impact assessments filed with county authorities. The interview with Hartley continued over several sessions, during which he provided increasingly detailed information about his interaction with the 3 travelers. According to his account, Martinez had asked him to help locate their missing companions, Mark Thompson and Sarah Williams, who had apparently left the group's campsite during the night for reasons that were unclear. Hartley told investigators that he had agreed to assist in the search for the missing individuals, using his knowledge of the forest terrain and access roads that were not marked on standard hiking maps. However, he claimed that the search effort had taken a tragic turn when the group encountered an unstable tree that had been damaged in previous logging operations. According to Hartley's statement, the damaged tree had created a hazardous situation that resulted in the deaths of Martinez, Crawford, and Chen. Hartley claimed that he had panicked after the incident and had disposed of the bodies in the sequoia tree to avoid legal responsibility for the tragedy that occurred while he was conducting unauthorized logging activities. Detective Clark's investigation of Hartley's claims revealed several inconsistencies with the physical evidence recovered from the sequoia. Forensic analysis had shown no indication of traumatic injuries that would be consistent with a tree-related incident, and the positioning of remains within the hollow chamber suggested careful placement rather than emergency disposal. Further investigation revealed that Hartley had a history of mental health issues and had been hospitalized for psychiatric treatment multiple times since 1997. Medical records obtained through court orders showed that Hartley had been diagnosed with conditions that could affect memory and perception, raising questions about the reliability of his statements. The investigation took another unexpected direction when Detective Clark located Frank Morrison, the retired logger who had reported seeing smoke in the forest during October 1997. Morrison, now 72 and living in a care facility in Eureka, provided a different account of events that contradicted Hartley's version. According to Morrison's statement, he had observed controlled burning activities in the remote forest area on Saturday, October 16, 1997. Morrison told investigators that he had assumed the fires were part of authorized forest management operations, though he later learned that no official burning had been scheduled in that location during the relevant time frame. Morrison's account suggested that someone had been conducting deliberate burning activities in the area where the travelers were found, potentially explaining the evidence of extreme heat exposure that Dr. Foster had noted during her forensic examination of recovered materials. The investigation expanded to examine whether other individuals might have been involved in the events of October 1997. Detective Clark reviewed employment records for all commercial operations that had been active in Humboldt County forests during that period, looking for workers who might have had access to the remote area where the sequoia was located. This review identified several individuals who had been working in forestry-related jobs during 1997, but were no longer living in the area. Detective Clark's team conducted interviews with former employees of logging companies, environmental consulting firms, and government agencies that had operated in the region. One of these interviews produced significant new information when former forestry technician Robert Walsh told investigators about unusual activities he had observed during October 1997. Walsh, who had been conducting wildlife surveys in the area, reported encountering evidence of unauthorized camping and fire activity in locations that were not designated for public use. According to Walsh's statement, he had discovered camping equipment and fire rings that appeared to have been used recently, but were not consistent with the gear and practices of typical recreational hikers. Walsh told investigators that he had reported these findings to his supervisors, but had not connected them to the missing travelers until learning about the current investigation. The revelation that multiple witnesses had observed unusual activities in the remote forest area during October 1997 prompted Detective Clark to reconsider the possibility that the travelers had encountered individuals who were already present in the area for reasons unrelated to hiking or recreation. Investigation of this theory led to the discovery of archived reports about illegal marijuana cultivation that had been conducted in Northern California forests during the 1990s. According to DEA records obtained by Detective Clark, law enforcement agencies had been tracking several large-scale growing operations in remote areas of Humboldt County during the relevant time frame. The possibility that Martinez and her companions had inadvertently encountered individuals involved in illegal activities provided a potential explanation for their disappearance and the unusual circumstances of their eventual discovery. However, Detective Clark acknowledged that proving this theory would require additional evidence or witness testimony. The search for Mark Thompson and Sarah Williams continued throughout 2021, with investigators using information from Hartley and other witnesses to focus on areas where the two missing individuals might be located. Ground-penetrating radar surveys and cadaver dog searches covered several square miles of forest terrain, but produced no additional discoveries. Carmen Rodriguez, who had followed the investigation closely, told reporters that she found the emerging information both encouraging and disturbing. While she was grateful for any progress in understanding her sister's fate, Rodriguez expressed concern about the implications of the witness accounts and the possibility that her sister and the others had encountered dangerous individuals in the forest. Patricia Crawford, now in her 70s, stated that she wanted closure regarding her husband's disappearance, but was troubled by the suggestion that the group might have been targeted by criminals operating in the area. Crawford emphasized that her husband and the others had been innocent travelers who had not sought out any dangerous situations. The investigation attracted renewed attention from true crime podcasters and documentary filmmakers, several of whom filed public records requests for access to case files and witness statements. Detective Clark's office worked to balance public interest in the case with the need to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. By late 2021, the case had generated more than 1,000 tips from the public, though most provided no credible leads about the missing travelers or the circumstances of their disappearance. Detective Clark's team continued following up on promising leads while acknowledging that some aspects of the case might never be fully explained. The families of all 5 missing travelers established a memorial fund in their honor, supporting wilderness safety education and search and rescue operations in Northern California. The fund reflected their desire to prevent similar tragedies while honoring the memory of their loved ones who had been lost in the remote forest. Linda Chen's parents, who had remained in contact with investigators through diplomatic channels, expressed gratitude that their daughter had finally been found, but continued to hope that additional information would emerge about the circumstances of her death. The investigation officially concluded active operations in December 2021, though the case remained open for any new leads or evidence that might surface. Detective Clark acknowledged that while significant progress had been made in understanding what happened to 3 of the missing travelers, important questions remained unanswered. The fate of Mark Thompson and Sarah Williams continued to weigh on their families and the investigators who had worked the case. Both individuals remained listed as missing persons, and their families maintained hope that future discoveries might provide the closure that had eluded them for more than 24 years. The case became a subject of study for criminology students and law enforcement training programs, illustrating the challenges of investigating disappearances in remote wilderness areas and the importance of preserving evidence across extended time frames. Detective Clark retired from the Humboldt County Sheriff's Department in 2022, passing responsibility for any future developments in the case to his successor. In his final report, Clark noted that the investigation had revealed the complexity of events that occurred during October 1997, but acknowledged that some aspects of the case would likely remain forever unknown. The giant sequoia where the remains were discovered became an unofficial memorial site, though the Sheriff's Department restricted access to the area to preserve any additional evidence that might be found. The tree stands as a silent witness to events that transformed multiple families and challenged investigators across 2 decades of searching for truth in the Northern California wilderness.